The village of Woolpit in Suffolk is the setting for an absolutely fascinating tale that took place during the 12th century. The village and the surrounding countryside were rural and agricultural, with life largely revolving around the cycles of the seasons, the church, and local feudal systems. Woolpit is actually derived from the Old English term wolf pit, meaning, surprisingly, wolf pit. These were deep traps that were dug into the ground, intended to catch wolves that threatened the livestock and therefore the livelihood of local farmers. Wolves, which were common throughout medieval England, were considered a serious threat. These pits were simple constructions, holes dug deep enough so that once a wolf fell in, it just wouldn't be able to climb back out. The traps were baited with carrion, camouflaged with branches and leaves to lure wolves onto them. Once trapped, the wolves could be killed by the villagers, protecting the community and its animals. It was in this setting, during the late summer harvest, that something unusual happened. The villagers, busy gathering the crops, noticed movement near one of the old wolf pits. Upon closer inspection, they discovered two young children, one boy and one girl, standing at the edge of the pit. What immediately struck the villagers was not just their sudden appearance from nowhere, but the strange colour of their skin. These children were green, their skin an unnatural shade that the villagers had never seen before. In addition to their green skin, the children were dressed in unfamiliar clothing. The fabric and style were unlike anything the villagers recognised, which raised questions about where exactly these children had come from. Moreover, the children spoke in a language that none of the villagers could understand. The boy and the girl were clearly frightened, their eyes wide, darting between the villagers, and their hands clung to each other as though seeking protection. It was clear that they just didn't understand where they were, nor did they recognise the people standing around them. In the close-knit community of Woolpit, where every face was known and every family had a place, the sudden appearance of these two unknown children caused an incredible stir. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the village, and it wasn't long before more villagers came to see the green-skinned children for themselves. The sight was so unusual that it defied simple explanation, and with the villagers unable to communicate with the children, they were left with far more questions than answers. Unsure of what to do next, the villagers decided to take the children to someone who might be able to help. In a time when the local nobility played a key role in the governance and protection of the community, it was natural for villagers to turn to Sir Richard de Calne. As a knight and a figure of authority, Sir Richard held influence in Woolpit and the surrounding area. He was known to be a man of good standing, connected to the church and involved in local affairs. If anybody could make sense of this, it would be him. Arriving at Sir Richard's home, the children were placed under his care. The household attempted to feed the children, offering them the usual fare of bread and meat and other foods typical of the medieval diet. However, the children refused all the food that was placed before them, and despite their obvious hunger, they seemed unable or unwilling to eat anything offered by their hosts. This refusal added another layer to the puzzle. The children's rejection of food wasn't a matter of simple dislike. It seemed to stem from an absolute unfamiliarity with the items that were presented. As the days passed and the children grew weaker, Sir Richard's household became increasingly concerned. The green-skinned children, who had already arrived in a state of disorientation and fear, were now at risk of starving. It was clear that something needed to be done, but without knowing their language or understanding their needs, it seemed impossible to help them. The villagers and Sir Richard's household could only watch and hope for a solution to present itself. Finally, a breakthrough came by accident. The children were shown green beans, still in their pods, fresh from the fields. To the relief of those caring for them, the children immediately recognised the beans and ate them with apparent eagerness. It seemed that despite their earlier refusals, the green beans were a food familiar to them. While the girl's health began to improve, her brother remained weak. Despite the care he received, he grew increasingly ill. Not long after the children were baptised, a common practice in medieval England, especially in cases where illness or death seemed imminent, the boy passed away. His death left only his sister to carry on the mystery of their arrival. The girl, as she regained her strength, began to learn the local language. Slowly she adapted to her new environment, though the questions surrounding her and her brother's origins remained unanswered. As the weeks passed and her ability to communicate improved, she would eventually lose her green colour, and her skin looked much more human. She would one day tell a story of where they had come from, but her account would only deepen the mystery that had already fascinated the villagers of Woolpit. As the girl learned the local language, she began to reveal more about her origins, telling the villagers of a place she called St. Martin's Land. According to her account, this land was very different from Woolpit and the surrounding countryside. In St. Martin's Land, the sun never fully rose, and the light was always dim, casting the entire world in a perpetual twilight. It was a strange, shadowy place, where the people lived in a state of half-light, never experiencing the full warmth and brightness of the sun. The girl described her homeland as a place divided by a great river. On one side of the river there was the land where she and her brother had lived, bathed in twilight. On the other side there was a land of brilliant, blinding light, a place they had never visited, but which they had been told about. The people of St. Martin's Land, the girl explained, were like her and her brother, with the same green skin and unfamiliar customs. One day, while herding their father's cattle, the children had heard a strange sound, like the ringing of bells. Drawn to the sound, they followed it into a cave, venturing deeper and deeper into the darkness. And before they knew it, they'd emerged on the other side, disoriented and confused, finding themselves in the bright, unfamiliar world of Woolpit. The journey through the cave had been sudden and inexplicable, and they had no memory of how they had crossed from their world into this one. The story of the Green Children did not remain confined to the village of Woolpit. It was recorded in two separate chronicles written by medieval historians William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall. These Latin texts provide the primary sources for the tale, and their preservation has ensured that the mystery of the Green Children continues to be studied and debated centuries after the events took place. William of Newburgh, a monk and historian, was known for his scepticism of fantastical stories, yet even he found the account of the Green Children compelling enough to include in his chronicle. William's account is brief, but it's detailed, describing the discovery of the children, their green skin, and the strange tale of their origins in St. Martin's Land. Despite his usual caution in reporting supernatural events, William seems to have taken the story seriously. Ralph of Coggeshall, an abbot and chronicler, wrote a more extensive account of the Green Children, offering additional details about their behaviour and the circumstances of their discovery. Ralph's version of the story includes descriptions of the children's refusal to eat, their eventual adaptation to their new environment, and the girl's account of St. Martin's Land. Like William, Ralph recorded the events with a sense of curiosity, preserving the story for future generations. Both William and Ralph's chronicles reflect the medieval mindset, in which the boundaries between the natural and supernatural worlds were quite fluid. Strange events were often seen as signs from God, or as manifestations of the unknown forces that shape the world. The inclusion of the Green Children's story in these respected chronicles suggests that the events in Woolpit were considered significant enough to be remembered, even if they could not be fully explained. The Latin texts of William and Ralph remain the foundation of all later interpretations of the Green Children, and over the centuries these chronicles have been studied and analysed by historians, folklorists, even scientists, each seeking to understand the meaning behind the mysterious events that they describe. The story of the Green Children has therefore given rise to numerous theories about their origins, ranging from the mundane to the absolutely fantastical. Over the centuries, scholars and researchers have proposed a variety of explanations, each attempting to make sense of the mystery while respecting the historical and cultural context of the time. One of the more grounded theories suggests that the children were in fact the descendants of Flemish immigrants who had settled in England during the 12th century. The Flemish people, who came from what is now Belgium and the Netherlands, were often persecuted and driven from their homes by political turmoil. Some historians speculate that the children might have come from a nearby Flemish settlement that had been attacked. Their green skin could have been the result of malnutrition or illness. In this interpretation, the children's strange language was simply Flemish, which the villagers of Woolpit would not have recognised. Another theory posits that the children were suffering from a condition known as chlorosis, or green sickness, often said to be a form of anemia caused by poor diet. This condition can cause the skin to take on a greenish tint, supposedly, particularly in malnourished children. The children's diet in St Martin's Land may have been severely limited, leading to their green skin, which faded as they began to eat a more varied diet in Woolpit. More speculative theories suggest that the children may have come from a hidden, isolated community possibly located underground or in a remote, uncharted area. This theory draws on the children's descriptions of St Martin's Land, with its dim light and strange customs. Some have even suggested that the children might have been from another world entirely, perhaps visitors from a parallel dimension or an extraterrestrial civilization. Folklorists have also explored the possibility that these children were connected to the fairy traditions of medieval England. In many stories, fairies are depicted as otherworldly beings who live in hidden realms, often accessed through caves and forests. The children's sudden appearance in Woolpit, along with their strange behaviour and otherworldly appearance, has led some to interpret the story as a manifestation of fairy folklore. The tale of the Green Children has persisted through the centuries, inspiring countless retellings and interpretations. It's been adapted into literature, art, and even modern media, with each generation finding a new meaning in the mystery. The story's themes of otherworldliness and survival and the unexplained continue to resonate, particularly in a world where the boundaries between the known and the unknown are constantly shifting. Has it been accurately or even faithfully represented in its retellings? I don't know about you, but I cannot read Latin. And really, if we want to understand this tale, we need to read the Latin texts first-hand, don't we? I can find the Ralph of Coggeshall text on the Internet Archive. What a fabulous place. And there is a preface in the book that is in English. I like the sound of this other story about Malkin, but maybe this one's for another video, look. Of a more dubious character are the wild stories about the merman captured at the Sea of Orford, of the green boy and girl, and of the house haunted by the familiar spirit called Malkin. Let's see if we can find anything about that for another video. The section dealing with the Green Children is titled De Quodam Puero et Pue de Terra Emergentibus. And I know I said I don't read Latin, and clearly I don't speak it either. I gave it a shot, you guys. Anyway, I'm obviously going to run this through some online translation tools to see what we can determine from the original reports, and if anything has been misreported in subsequent retellings. I can't vouch for the accuracy of the tools I will use, but we'll have to try something, won't we? So, here's one translation. Another marvel, not unlike the previous one, occurred in Suffolk at St Mary's of Woolpit. A certain boy, along with his sister, was found by the inhabitants of that place near the edge of a pit which is located there. They had the appearance of all their body parts similar to other humans, but the colour of their skin differed from all mortals in our inhabited world, for the entire surface of their skin was dyed with a green colour. No one could understand their language. These children were brought to the house of a certain knight, Lord Richard de Calne, at Wyke, where they cried inconsolably out of fear. Bread and other food were set before them, but they refused to eat anything that was offered, even though they were suffering greatly from hunger, because they believed that all such food was inedible, as the girl later confessed. At last, when beans, recently cut with the stalks, were brought into the house, they eagerly signalled that they wished to be given the beans. However, when the beans were brought before them, they opened the stalks, not the pods, thinking that the beans were contained in the hollow of the stalks. When they did not find the beans in the stalks, they began to cry again. Observing this, those present opened the pods and showed the beans, and when the children saw them, they ate them with great delight, not touching any other food for a long time. The boy, however, constantly seemed to be depressed by a sort of languor and died shortly after. The girl, on the other hand, eventually recovered fully, became accustomed to eating various foods, and gradually lost her green colour, regaining the usual complexion of her body. After being regenerated by the sacrament of holy baptism, she lived for many years in the service of the aforementioned knight, as we frequently heard from the knight and his family. When frequently asked about the people of her country, she asserted that all the inhabitants and everything in that region were tinged with a green colour, and that they did not see the sun, but enjoyed a certain dim light like what occurs after sunset. When asked how she and the boy had arrived in this land, she responded that while following their livestock, they entered a certain cave. Upon entering, they heard the delightful sound of bells, and captivated by the sweetness of the sound, they wandered through the cave for a long time, until they came to its exit. When they emerged from the cave, they were overwhelmed and stunned by the brightness of the sun and the unfamiliarity of the atmosphere, and they lingered near the edge of the cave, almost in a state of shock. They lay in the caves, and when they were frightened by the disturbance of those who came upon them, they wanted to flee, but they could not find the entrance to the cave until they were captured by them. It's a short piece. I was expecting a big, long story, to be honest, but there it is. Interestingly, the area of Suffolk where Woolpit exists is characterised by its low-lying countryside, which is largely composed of chalk, clay, and other pretty soft sedimentary rocks that don't typically form large natural caves. Additionally here, the account says that the journey through the cave took a long time, whereas my initial leads into this story suggested otherwise, that the journey was almost instantaneous. The other text, the Historia Rerum Anglicarum, says this: There is a village in East Anglia said to be 4 or 5 miles distant from the noble monastery of the blessed king and martyr, Edmund. Near this village, certain very ancient pits can be seen, which in English language are called wolf pits, and they give their name to the village to which they are adjacent. From these pits, during the time of harvest, when the reapers were occupied in gathering the crops in the fields, there emerged 2 children, a boy and a girl, entirely green in body and of an unusual colour, clothed in garments of unknown material. As they wandered in amazement through the field, they were captured by the reapers and taken to the village. Many people gathered to witness such a novelty, and for a few days they were kept without food. As they were nearly perishing from hunger and refused all the food that was offered to them, it happened that beans were brought in from the fields. They immediately seized them, but sought to find the beans inside the stalks, and finding nothing in the hollow of the stalks, began to cry bitterly. Then one of those present, opening the pods, offered the beans to them, which they readily accepted and ate. They lived on this food for several months, until they learned to eat bread. Finally, as the nature of our food prevailed, they gradually changed their colour and became like us, and they also learned to speak our language. It seemed wise to those who cared for them that they should receive the sacrament of holy baptism, which they did. However, the boy, who appeared to be the younger of the two, after living only a short time following his baptism, died an untimely death. The girl remained alive and in good health, and different in no way from the women of our race. It is said that she later married, and a few years ago she was still alive. Now, not a lot else to go on there, is there? Or so it would seem. A huge amount of research into this, however, has been done by Duncan Loonan, who published a book titled Children from the Sky. It's an evocative title, and it suggests extraterrestrial origins, of course. And whilst the research is impressive, and the speculation in there is absolutely fascinating, it is quite a tough read. The way the book is written is absolutely necessary to establishing this tale as a real event that happened to real people, but it is really, really heavy going. Nevertheless, it's a vital part of the puzzle for anybody interested in this tale. So a lot of what I'll now discuss is largely influenced by that research and is augmented by my own speculation and questioning. Loonan makes a point of the following things, which are either pertinent to the direction that this video will take or are at least of interest in the whole tale. Number 1, the girl apparently claimed that in her land not everything is actually green, only the things that are safe to eat. My question there is, if there's things that are safe to eat, then why are the people green as well? Number 2, the children actually did not say they were herding the cattle. The direct translation from the Latin text is that they said they were following the cattle, and Loonan places great importance on the difference between herding and following. Number 3, chlorosis, widely said to be a possible cause for the green skin, is a disease that is questionable and might actually be a catch-all term for anemia and anorexia and depression in adolescents. Number 4, the children were actually well at the point they were discovered because they subsequently survived a period of starvation where they wouldn't eat anything. Number 5, in Greece and Rome, a well-known way to defend yourself against evil spirits is to spit beans at them. Pliny's Natural History said that the souls of the dead resided in beans, and Japan has a similar custom of throwing beans at demons to get them out of your house and usher in good fortune. Number 6, Woolpit was not some isolated country bumpkin village. It was a transport and trade hub, meaning that villagers would likely recognise the dialects of a wide range of European languages, maybe not well enough to speak in those tongues, but possibly well enough to recognise them. At least if the villagers had spent enough time with the Flemish people to be able to have enough of a hatred towards them that they persecuted them, then they would recognise bits of the lingo. Nobody recognised the language that these children were speaking. Number 7, the Latin text says that the children's skin was dyed green. Number 8, there are to be found factual, fictional and speculative versions of this tale. Number 9, subsequent retellings of the account impose their own theories onto the subject. And number 10, Lunan admits, so does he. And in fact, so shall I in this video. And whilst Lunan goes into extraordinary factual and speculative detail, I can't possibly spend the time digesting it all. There are multiple threads and dead ends in the book, and honestly finding a cohesive outcome is really, really difficult, I find. But then again, this channel is all about the what if, isn't it? So be aware that my research is far-reaching but somewhat cursory, and my understanding might not be the most solid, but that's what the comment section is for, isn't it? For your theories and your facts to be offered up, and not just to mock my accent. There's more to the tale, and it was provided supposedly by the girl herself when she had eventually grown and married and become a functioning member of society. Not only that, but it appears she occupied some position of authority. When she was later asked about the people of her country, she swore on oath that all the inhabitants and plants there were dyed with the colour green. She said that they came from the land of St. Martin. We are people of the land of St. Martin, who of course in the land of our birth is held in the very highest exceptional respect. We remember this much, because on a certain day we were driving to pasture, adding to our father's animals in the fields, we heard a certain great sound which we now are accustomed to hear at St. Edmund's when they say the bells are ringing. And when we turned our minds to that sound, which surprised us, suddenly, unawares, as if placed in some loss of mind, we found ourselves in the field where you were reaping. When they were asked if they believed in Jesus and whether the sun rose, they said that the land was Christian and had churches. But the sun, they said, of our countries does not rise, and our country is little lit by its rays, but it is satisfied with that measure of light which with you precedes sunrise or follows sunset. Moreover, far off a certain bright land is seen, not far from our land, with a very broad river dividing the two. Ralph de Coggelshaw says she was in the employ of Edward de Calne as Ministerio Praedicti Militis, translated as she remained in the service of the aforementioned knight, which Lunan suggests probably means she was an estate manager or manor house keeper, given that ministerio is where we get today's words minister and ministry from, and therefore are not analogous to a job such as a cleaner or a maid. This position is then used to bolster Lunan's opinions around the origins of the girl, and that it had been claimed that she was merely a runaway from some savage English tribe. The fact that she was able to learn language, obtain a high position on the knight's estate, suggests that her intelligence is advanced and therefore the savage theory is less likely. I assume it's Latin that she learned as well as English, and this led to a whole new life, and she was christened in the Christian faith, which means she would have been given a name, and this has been put forward via various publications across the centuries as Sally, Barbara, Peregrine, Adela, and Elderflower. The author, Lunan, after a meandering but admittedly necessary trip through property and marriage records, comes to the conclusion that the girl was probably christened as Agnes. A real person, with real records. She existed. She was married, apparently, to a Richard Barr, an archdeacon. But here's where things get weird. In particular, Lunan sets out his stall by talking in depth not about the children particularly at first, but rather about a book by Robert Burton from 1621 titled The Anatomy of Melancholy, in which, among many other subjects, is a discussion about meteorology and astronomy. The author was particularly interested in contemporary theorists, proving that the planets were actual worlds, showing therefore that space could be navigable and was a medium that was traversable, rather than, from what I can gather, was a prevailing theory that the lights in the sky were some sort of crystalline shells suspended or held in a solid substance. This meant that space travel, therefore, was probably possible. And it so happens that at the time of the discovery of these children there were other strange things happening in the sky and other events that related to their arrival. Auroral displays, something referred to as an odd unmoving stare, and an account of a crescent moon that seemingly opened at one end of the arcs and spewed out a load of flame into space, and distorting the lower crescent, making it appear to wind about like a snake. You can speculate at will on what these things might have been. Now, this is all told in a chapter titled Making an Impact with King Henry, and having listened to an interview with Lunan, I know where he's going with this, but again, I have to say this book, it just meanders off into hyper-explanation, and you'd soon forget what the point of what you're reading is. The thing is, though, I love to indulge in that level of research myself, but I know it's far too much for somebody watching a video. So yes, it's a criticism, but it's one made through admiration of the work. So what's all this got to do with King Henry then? Well, to give you the gist of it, it seems that King Henry had a real interest in this kind of thing. He viewed Woolpit as a particularly active area, and indeed at one point annexed the village. Now this confused me at first because I assumed the king just owned everything, but in those feudal times the area was probably under the control of a nobleman or religious institution or something. So he was keen enough to have first dibs on this area that he saw as being of particular interest in the scope of strange things happening in the sky. So you can absolutely bet London to a brick that he heard about the Green Children. In fact, Lunan is positive that Henry was in fact expecting something to happen and had made backup plans in his known absence in some war that he was fighting, that Richard de Calne would take charge of anything odd that happened in that area. From there are so many threads, both in the book and in other media concerning the case. The assimilation of the girl into the greater family of King Henry on one side, the possibility of the children being accidentally returned to Earth from an Earth-like planet upon which thousands of abducted humans have lived for centuries on another, the possibility of the children just being Flemish immigrants, or the even more grounded theory that the kids were just actually from the next village over, which coincidentally happened to have a church called St. Martin's in it. All these ingredients, these weird kids, the bells, the caves, the aristocracy, odd things in the sky, they're all at once everything, and yet they are nothing. They're just a melange of tantalising pools in which to swim and languish in search for an answer. Yet Lunan's book is full not only of his own opinion, but extracts of other publications, conversations which he's had with other people, and quotes from yet more. So it's not my job, nor at all is it within my grasp, if I'm honest, to give you a definite answer on what Lunan's conclusion really is. The book is an utter work of genius. It's mad genius, in fact. And this might actually be a commentary on my level of intelligence, but here goes. I didn't get it. My curiosity was massively intrigued by this notion of the children being transported from another Earth-like planet, which was derived largely from listening to Lunan talk. But then in his book there is this specific paragraph that states, "But it is important to shed the idea that the children might have been alien, which somebody persists in adding to my Wikipedia page." But then in the section of the book titled The Final Conjecture, he lays out a clear timeline of first contact with some beings, beginning in BC 10,500, leading to the arrival of the Green Children as the result of some sort of error involving unexpected interactions between matter transmitters and magnetic fields, and rounds it off with this. I can scarcely believe what I'm looking at. Mass abductions by extraterrestrials for experimental purposes, with the knowledge, connivance and even support of some of the authorities of the day, the X-Files in the 12th century. I find the case fascinating, frustrating, amazing and baffling. I urge you to read the book, hard as it is to get through. Buy it on Kindle, it's a couple of quid. I urge you to seek out the other videos on this and the literature on this. If Lunan really has managed to trace the records of this green girl as being a real married person in adulthood, and if that girl was indeed from some other world, then this is utterly mind-blowing. Find out what you can and come back to this video and comment on it and let me know. Hit the like button please, it's the thumbs up button in the corner there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and share this video with your friends and all that good YouTube stuff. Bye for now.